Le balado Saumon Québec est une présentation de la Fédération québécoise pour le saumon atlantique. La meilleure façon de nous soutenir et de rendre nos projets possibles, c'est de devenir membre. Bonne écoute!
Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue à cet autre balado de Saumon Québec. Je m'appelle Lynn Morissette. Bonjour Normand.
Bonjour Lynn.
Ça va bien?
Ben oui, ça va bien, toi?
C'est cool de faire ça avec toi aujourd'hui.
Ben oui, ça fait changement. Cool. Hein?
On a quelque chose de spécial aujourd'hui parce que, on fait le tour de la salmosphère et il y a certains endroits où on a des experts à qui on voulait parler qui sont dans des pays anglophones. Donc, ce balado va être principalement une conversation en anglais. Mais je vous reviens à la fin du balado pour vous faire un petit recap de tout ça. On va parler de la situation globale du saumon atlantique du côté des pays scandinaves. Donc, c'est quoi les enjeux là-bas? Est-ce qu'il y a des problèmes spécifiques à ces régions-là? Les solutions qui sont en place, à quel point c'est pareil ou différent de ce qu'on vit ici au Québec? On fait le tour de tout ça. Alors, on switch à une conversation en anglais. Et puis, on vous revient tout de suite après. Mais je peux déjà vous dire qu'on fait cet épisode-là avec Kim Birnie-Gauvin, qui est une scientifique canadienne qui vit maintenant au Danemark, et avec Gustav Hellström, qui est un scientifique suédois qui est basé dans le sud de la Suède. Donc, on va les rejoindre là-bas. Hi Kim, hi Gustav.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us today. As an introduction, let's just put the situation in context. The situation of Atlantic salmon in the Scandinavian countries, so we're talking Norway, Sweden, Denmark, is really a cause of concern due to several factors, including overfishing, pollution, river development. We have like dam and infrastructure development disrupting the salmon's life cycle, habitat loss, the impact of aquaculture and invasive species. And each country in the Scandinavian region faces specific challenges in preserving its wild salmon populations, but efforts are underway to reverse these negative trends. So in this podcast with you today, we'll learn more about the respective situation of different Scandinavian countries and see if the situation is similar to that of southern Quebec, whose population experienced drastic declines in 2023 and 2024. So to talk about all that, I introduced you, but here again, Kim Birnie-Gauvin is a Canadian scientist living in Denmark. She's a researcher at the National Institute of Aquatic Resources section of Freshwater Fisheries Ecology for the Technical University of Denmark. Am I right? It's quite a long title.
That's correct. Yes, it's
but
a very
wait, I'm
long
not
title.
done. You're also, if I read my notes well, you're also interested in understanding the effects of stress on the survival and life history traits of fish. More specifically, you wish to understand the extent to which anthropogenic activities affect aquatic ecosystems. Am I right? Good.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of summing up what I do. I essentially look at where, when, and why fish are vulnerable in the wild.
Thanks for being with us, Kim. And Gustav Hellström, Swedish scientist, senior lecturer at the Department of Wildlife, Fish and Environmental Studies at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Your research focuses on the behavior and migration of aquatic species in their natural habitats, which includes river, lakes, and marine environments. An important aspect of your research is to use modern methods to track fish. Most of your research has practical applications with an emphasis on the management and conservation of different fish species, right?
Yeah, that's basically sums it up.
That's good. Thanks for being with us, Gustav. And thank
Pretty
you.
hard to put that on a business card, right?
Kind of long, right? And thanks, Normand, for being with us as well. I just remind our listeners that you're the president of the FQSA,
yep.
Fédération québécoise du saumon atlantique. Before we start with all these big questions about the science and the situation in the Scandinavian countries, can you explain to me a little bit, like, what got you in the salmon, like, research area? Did it started when you were kids, or like how you ended up where you are today in terms of career? Maybe Gustav.
Yeah, I think I probably have the most common way of entering into this. I'm really an interested fisherman and have been fishing all my life. And in adult years, I've been fishing more and more for salmon. So that was sort of the natural way into the whole field of biology and fish biology and now research.
Most of our guests always have a story of they were fishing when they were young and they ended up being the experts that they are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it makes it interesting when you have that passion. It certainly helps, when you have a career in research, and on top of it, you have a passion for the sport itself. I think it talks a lot about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what about you, Kim? What made you end up there, and what made you, une fille de Québec, end up working in Denmark?
I think my story is maybe a little bit different. I love fishing for sure, and I did do it as a kid, but it wasn't really a sport, I guess, that I did, very often. I think I kind of approached it the other way around, where I was actually on my way to medical school and then realized there was actually a whole lot of problems with our planet and the situation just for biodiversity and especially the aquatic realm. And I've always been, my mom called me a mermaid when I was a kid. I've always loved water. And so I think I was just, passionate about that world and wanting to understand it and protect it. So I kind of approached it that way. Salmon just happened to be something that I worked with, along with, a dozen, if not more, other species. But it was kind of serendipitous, I guess. I've never touched a salmon in Quebec, and yet I've worked with salmon from British Columbia and California and all over Europe as well, but not from Quebec. So maybe a slightly different path to there.
And why Denmark now?
Oh, that's also a long story. But to try to keep it very short, during my master's at Carleton University in Ottawa, my supervisor at the time, Steve Cook, knew someone who worked in Denmark here at the Technical University. And he sent me to do field work. So all my master's field work, all my research for my master's was done here in Denmark. So I just came here, met people, fell in love with the lifestyle, the country. And then they offered me a PhD. So I came here and I've not looked back since.
And the rest is history.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. So you're based in Denmark and Sweden, but we're going to cover the situation in Scandinavian countries in general. And well, first of all, can you give us some sort of a brief overview of the situation of wild Atlantic salmon in your respective countries?
Sure, I can start with that. I mean, it's an interesting topic to begin with, to compare these three countries, and it's very different. In Sweden, at least, salmon. When people talk salmon, it's 95% is the Baltic salmon, and that's the Baltic Sea, and that's sort of where everything happens, and what all the money and funding and problems are related to. So we have the Baltic salmon, and that's sort of a contained small universe in itself, and problems are different, monitoring different, management is very different from the way the Atlantic salmon in the Atlantic Sea is sort of.
Is it the same species though? Sorry.
Yeah. It's the same.
Yeah. It's
very
just
little genetic
in the Baltic Sea
though.
instead of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
But it is salmon salar.
Yeah, salmon salar. But it's different. It's very little genetic integration, if you want to use that word, between sort of the Atlantic side and the Baltic Sea side. So they have developed in their own time and their own way. So, but the species is exactly the same. Very interesting small differences in the way the Baltic salmon population sort of, the way we don't, for example, have any size structured rivers the same way as Norway have and stuff like that, but that's details. But just to give a brief overview, we have the Baltic salmon in the Baltic Sea, and I think historically it was maybe over 100 wild salmon rivers in this area, maybe 120 even. And these days, I think maybe 30 in the whole area, so it's quite a dramatic decline. In Sweden, I think we have 16 or 17 wild salmon rivers in the Baltic Sea still. And we had about 30 as well in Sweden, which has been And the reason for this is mainly damming, I would say. That's sort of the main thing that has sort of cut off these wild salmon rivers.
In both countries, is the same kind of challenge for the dams?
Yes and no. I would say river fragmentation or habitat destruction is probably the more common theme, but the whole damming situation is very different in Denmark than I think a lot of other countries, simply because Denmark is very flat. So the highest point above sea level in Denmark is about 170 meters, just to give you an idea. And that means that we don't have a lot of gradient in our rivers. So from the source to the sea, there's very little drop. So if you think about it, it's not a very good country to have hydropower, to have dams. There's not a lot of water falling. So it's not the best way of getting energy. But so, whatever dams we do have, of course, still have an effect. But the big problem with us is that, just one dam, and if you think of the reservoir upstream, one dam can have a huge effect because we already have this really limited gradient. And just by putting one or a few dams, you remove whatever small amount was available to start with. So in that sense, yes, we have a problem, but it's a bit different than in most of the mountainous regions of Norway and Sweden.
And what's the situation for the Atlantic salmon population there in Denmark? Is it similar to what we see in Norway and Sweden?
I think it's also a little bit different. Up until maybe a year or two ago, our populations have actually been going up for some years. So we are probably one of the few countries in the world, or a few countries that have Atlantic salmon, where that has been the trend. And that's due to, in the late 90s, early 2000s, pretty stringent efforts to restore rivers, stop stocking of non-native salmon strains. So there was actually salmon from Ireland and from Sweden who used to be stocked in the rivers here when they thought that the Danish salmon was actually extirpated. And then they found out in the 90s, some of the older folks that I work with here found out there was still native salmon. So they stopped stocking the Swedish and Irish fish and only, stocked the Danish fish along with, a ton of other efforts. And so the fish kind of bounced back. And now in the last maybe 3-4 years, we're facing some new challenges, which is requiring us to think about maybe some new ways of addressing the problem.
Quick question for the Baltic salmon. The adult feeding grounds, I guess the equivalent to Greenland for the Atlantic salmon. Where does that happen for the Baltic salmon?
Yeah, so that's in the southern Baltic, the Baltic proper, where and there you definitely have a big mixed stock situation where almost all the populations from the entire Baltic Sea, except for maybe the Gulf of Finland, will sort of mix in that area.
Do you get the same situation where you have some of the salmon that is destined to come back as a grill, like 1 year at sea, but most fish will come back, 2 years at sea? I mean, in Quebec, we have a proportion of probably 80% of our spawners are 2 years at sea. Are we looking at the same kind of habit or whatever behavior?
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things, given that it's a lot of stuff is different in the Baltic Sea, but we definitely have 2 sea winter fish, and we also have quite a lot of 3 sea winter fish.
Okay.
I would say grills and 1 sea winter fish is quite uncommon. Last couple of years, there's been an increase, but in general, that's not the sort of what's happening. Most of the salmon coming up are big 2 or 3 sea winter fish.
Okay.
And
6-7 kilos and above.
Do you have to deal with that kind of mystery of what's happening at sea, like we're dealing with in Quebec, for the returns? Is it the same kind of mystery box that we have in the Scandinavian countries?
In Sweden, in the Baltic Sea, definitely. So I mean, if you zoom out on the Baltic salmon, you have to say it's a success story in that sense, because in the 90s and 80s, it was more or less eradicated. It was a really, really bad situation, but a number of good decisions have turned the situation around. And 5, maybe 7, 8 years ago, we had amazing runs in our rivers, historically really, really good runs. But one sort of wet blanket all over that has been sort of what's happening in the sea, and post-smolt mortality, the same problems that you have in the Atlantic Sea, also happens in the Baltic Sea. And this is, people have tried to solve this question for the last 30 years. Nobody really knows.
So we're not alone.
No. I'm just going to bounce back to Kim here, and you guys will see where I'm going with this. The grills, what's the behavior of the Atlantic salmon in Denmark? Do you have that kind of split where, you have the 2 years at sea run, maybe 3 years, but there's also grills coming in a typical typical run?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the percentage is in terms of 1 sea winter, 2 sea winter. I think a lot of it also depends on what river we're talking about. I think generally speaking, the most common life history strategy will be 2 sea winter, because we know the fish, similar to your fish, actually also go to Greenland. It's a long way. If you're going to go there, you may as well stay there a little bit longer, get nice and fat, and then come back. But of course, it's more risky, right? You're at sea longer. There's seals, whales, whatever can eat them on the way there and once they're over there. But similar to what Gustav mentioned, I feel like we are starting to see more smaller adults. What we don't know is, are these grills, so they've only been at sea 1 year, or are they 2 sea winter fish that just haven't grown as much? And there is a thought, or at least we're starting to discuss that there might be something going on at sea that we have absolutely no control over, whether it's climate change related or something else related. And that's a lot harder to figure out.
But typically there's not that many grills like the 1 year at sea that in Denmark. It is not a large proportion of the salmon runs, if I understand right.
That's correct. And one thing we know for sure is that once the fish have spawned at least 1 year, if they go back out, they skip a year. So we only get alternate spawners, not consecutive spawners.
Oh, really? Okay.
Interesting.
The reason why I was asking, just to stay on the grill topic for a couple of seconds here, I don't know if you guys realize it or not, but we've experienced our biggest panic in the last couple of years were the runs, the summer runs of 2023 and 2024, where the grills that were typically part of the runs were very much diminished. We're talking about 50, 40%, 80% decrease. So we're trying to understand why these grills, and naturally we have demonstrated that, if there's very little grills that come back in 2023, well, we expected 2023 to have a very low run of 2 years at sea, and it has been confirmed. So we're trying to understand what's creating this high mortality or non-return at sea. So we're trying to compare with some of the stuff that happens on your side of the ocean.
Yes, and I'm wondering, what part of the population is facing the biggest threats in the Scandinavian countries, and is it the same kind of threats that we are here? Like, what are you targeting in terms of fight right now? Is it climate change? Is it overfishing? Like, what is it exactly?
Or the swear word, aquaculture?
Aquaculture. Yeah, we need to address aquaculture after. Yeah, definitely.
I think it's hard to say. I know, and Gustav mentioned that the post-smolt. So when the fish leave the river, they're into this really really environment all of a sudden. That has been something that has been focused on, or people have said this is a really high risk life stage for salmon. I tend to think about it a little bit differently, because yes, the number of fish that leave the river is usually at least linked in some way to how many fish come back as adults. So you want as many of them to make it out as possible. But we're seeing maybe less adults returning, which is suggesting that maybe there is something going on at sea. We're also seeing that the smolts, there tends to be less of them. Is it because there's something going on in the river? And we are in Denmark right now facing issues related to predation being a huge problem.
Which predator?
In particular, what, sorry?
Which predator?
Cormorants are the biggest problem, at least in the rivers here. We have otters, we have pike, we have other species, but we know the cormorants eat 25 to 40 something percent at a minimum of the smolts that we've tagged. Oh. And that's only the tags that we're able to then detect in cormorant colonies, right? So there's also a number that gets shed at sea or somewhere else. There's also other predation. There's seals. We have seals coming up rivers as well. They're not supposed to be in rivers. They're marine mammals. So that's certainly a problem. I'm not going to stand here and say we need to call all the predators. That's not a solution. It could be part of the solution, but there's a lot of other issues related in Denmark, for example, to agriculture. So runoff from farmland that's causing all sorts of blooms, that's causing all sorts of hypoxic waters. There's water temperatures going up to 22, 24 degrees in our rivers in the summer. So there's lots of stuff. So the fish it's not just one stressor they have to deal with. It's like a series of stressors that just never stops. So I don't know that I can say what the biggest threat is, but I think if we give them, the best habitat that we can, and whether that be removing barriers and just giving them, thermal refuge, and I think that's at least fixing the problems that are in our own backyards. Whereas the problems at sea are much harder to deal with. Mm-hmm.
Mostly similar situation in Quebec, except for one big difference. Our smolt runs. Our smolt ones were actually, some rivers we had record smolt runs in 2022, 2023, now we're starting to see the impact of the poor adult runs in the last couple of years, where naturally that's going to affect the number of smolts. But prior to this huge decline, we had record smolt runs. So it's weird how things can be different from one big area to the other. I mean, we're not talking about side-by-side rivers here, but
over the butthole. But within Scandinavia, is it the same kind of challenge you're facing in Sweden, Gustav, or there are some specific things to Sweden?
Yeah, I would say it's quite different, and it's a big topic. But given that, again, coming back to sort of the success stories, of what we're seeing the last 30 years is the Baltic salmon recovering quite insanely from almost being more or less eradicated to I think Torneåjoki, or Torneälven, as we say in Sweden. That's sort of the border river between Finland and Sweden. In the last couple of years, it's been probably the most productive wild salmon river in the world.
Wow.
And we had a couple of years, 2016, 17, maybe 15, 16, we had over 100,000 adult fish coming up. And these are big fish. These are fish, 2 or 3, even 4 sea winter fish coming up. So we sort of have that, which is a result of more or less restricting fishery, really good management policies, and ease of disease and stuff like that. So what we're ending up with here is we have the success story, we have our populations coming back, and then we also see this sort of decline the last couple of years, maybe since 22, that something is happening. It's just a few years, so it's very difficult to say anything about it, but people sort of react that there's something happening. Some rivers have much smaller runs than others, so it's a big variation.
So are people flying into Scandinavia to try to understand how you manage to do that? Like these success stories? Because I mean, it's inspiring when we're facing similar challenges.
But I think it's an interesting question comparing, because I mean, you guys in the Atlantic, you have sort of restricted the commercial fisheries quite a lot, right? Since long. And in the Baltic Sea, we still have quite a big commercial fisheries on Atlantic salmon. What we did is we sort of removed the mixed stock fishery in the southern Baltic and moved the fishery closer to the rivers. So we more have sort of stock specific or population specific quotas and stuff like that, which was a big deal. But we still have pretty big harvest, which is almost weird having this iconic silver fish. Everybody loves it. And then we still have quite brutal harvesting on them in some rivers.
And how is it managed, commercial fishing in Scandinavian countries? Is it similar to what we do in like on the river side of the populations, or it's something completely different with completely different departments or organization? Who manages that and how?
Should I or should you, Kim?
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to say it's very different. So in Denmark, I mean, we have one river where there's still some salmon, but the only source of the salmon are stock salmon, and they go into the Baltic. And as Gustav said, in the Baltic, there's still quite a bit of like commercial fishing going on, but otherwise in Denmark, as far as I know, there's no real commercial fishing. They get caught as bycatch once in a while, I suppose. But otherwise, it's mostly recreational angling. And so we have people from all over Europe, sometimes all over the world, who come and fish for salmon because the salmon fishing here is good. Fish are big. And otherwise, once the quotas reach, it's only catch and release. And it's managed actually by some of our consultants here at DTU, which is really nice for us because that means the people who do the science are down the hall from the people who give the management advice. So that has been, I think, a really successful way of doing it. Commercially, I have no idea, Gustav. That's on you.
No, and it's in Sweden, I think the ICES is setting sort of a main quota, total allowable catch, and then each country gets sort of the part of that quota based on the production that they have in the country. So Sweden and Finland is the major two countries. Basically, we take all the fish, split them more or less equally, and then each country can sort of do what they want with their quota. So they could don't fish it up if they want, then they can spread it out spatially, which we have done in Sweden. I have sort of regional quotas.
Are there pressures right now from people that are concerned about Atlantic salmon to stop the commercial fisheries in the Baltic Sea, or is that a moot point?
So it's always that, right? And you always have especially recreational fishermen sort of complaining about the commercial fisheries, but it's still, given that the populations are, from the potential smolt production, a lot of populations are quite good. So 80-85% of what you estimate the production capacity of the river is. And if you look at the commercial harvest, then they will take about 15% of adults coming up. So that's quite a low number.
Okay.
So that's that. But then, of course, if you have the commercial fishery just close to the coast, close to the river mouth, and then you have a recreational fisheries up in the river, there's tension in there. So there's definitely movements and people trying to reduce the commercial fisheries. And one way is inspired by what they did in Iceland, is that there's people buying up the quotas from the commercial fishermen.
Okay.
And just, they buy the quota and then the commercial fishermen get sort of what it's worth, but they don't fish. So that's happening quite a lot.
So they buy the quotas, but for not fishing it. They just send the money to preserve the resource. Oh, that's an interesting idea. And how about like sport fishing? I know that you have like some sort of river closures in Norway. Is it another like tool to manage like the sport part of, like the recreational part of the fishing in Scandinavia?
Should I go ahead, Gustav?
Yeah, you can take every other.
I guess that's also managed perhaps a little bit differently by each country. So in Denmark, I don't think there have been river closures, and that's essentially every year we do an evaluation of the spawning run, as most countries do, and then we decide based on that whether it's like higher or lower, or whether we should close fishing. So it is each quota is determined for each river, and then dependent on the spawning population of that year. will be, the number will be set. So we have had river closures in the last, I believe last year, actually, there was no take-home salmon. So when we say closure, is that they're not allowed to kill a salmon to bring it home. Catch and release, as far as I know, is always allowed unless the river temperature is higher than, I think, 18 degrees. Then we just don't support fishing because the fish have trouble recovering from that interaction. But we also have limits on tackle, season, the gear you use and that sort of thing. I think that's fairly standard practices.
And how
but
about
it's not as common here, I think, that we get river closures as they do in Norway. Norway's been hit particularly hard the last year or two with their salmon.
By the swear word.
Yes, by the forbidden word.
We'll get to that very soon, trust me.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. When you do talk about Denmark, you're talking about Denmark mainland. That does not include what
Greenland.
happens in Greenland, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So
I just want to clarify that for the...
Yeah, but if I can comment on Greenland.
Yeah, sure.
So Atlantic salmon don't really, at least from the eastern side of Greenland, they don't really go in the rivers. They go there to feed. But as far as I know, Greenland doesn't really have rivers with salmon runs. There might be one.
That's what I understand also.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean Denmark. Denmark proper, not Greenland. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think we should address the elephant in the room now.
The swear word.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about like farming industry and like what's your perspective on like how countries deal with the wild Atlantic salmon from pressure of intensive farming in general? Like what's happening in Norway and how it affects the other countries in Scandinavia? And what's your thought about that situation?
Yeah, so for the Baltic salmon, it's not a problem because it's the Baltic is not really suitable for these sort of high intensity
Good for
farming.
them.
Yeah, exactly. So we have another kind of farming, but it's not the one. We have the compensatory hatchery stocking. So
and how does it work? What is it
so
exactly?
That's a big legacy from the damming of the rivers in the 60s and stuff like that. So when we lost wild production habitat or production capacity in the rivers, we had this massive compensation program that's been running since then, which is we can discuss for hours about that. But the main thing is to release hatchery smolts. In some rivers to compensate, but that's not at all the same problems as the high intensity farming that you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Good news.
Yeah. We're very happy for that.
How about Denmark?
It's pretty similar news, actually.
That's
and
good.
the reason, so we have some farming. I feel like I should maybe know the answer to this. Hopefully my colleagues don't like slap my fingers later. I think we only have maybe between 12 and 20 sea pens.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the grand scheme of things, it's a very small number. And I'm pretty sure that the government has said there will be no more. But I remember some years ago them trying to actually expand that a little bit, saying that where they wanted to do it, the sea lice would not survive. Because as in Denmark, as you go around Denmark towards the Baltic, you get into the Kattegat, and the Kattegat has lower salinity than,
Oh, I thought it was a temperature, but it's a salinity challenge to be able to find places where the sea lice won't survive.
At least here it is. Temperature might also be part of it, but salinity is definitely a big thing. So the sea lice don't survive when salinity is low.
Okay.
That's why some of the salmon they've shown actually in Norway, some of the smolts and the post smolts, if they have a heavy sea lice infection, they'll actually move back to the river to shed the lice before going back to sea. So we don't have that many sea pens, so it's not a big program in Denmark. So sea lice hasn't been too much of an issue here.
The sea pens, are they pretty much all situated at the river outlets, or are they somewhat moved?
Not any of our salmon river outlets anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Yeah. And
I think so too.
So the farming situation is not that bad in Sweden and Denmark, but how the massive fish farming industry that happens in Norway, is it affecting your salmon all the way down to the other countries, or do you see the effect of that in Sweden and Denmark, even though it's not happening where you are?
Not really in the Baltic Sea for sure, and not too much in the Kattegat-Skagerrak area as well. I mean, so.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just the problem with the salmon farming in Norway is just insane, and we're very happy that we don't have it in the Baltic Sea.
So it's just something that you look at, but being kind of secured in your country because it's not really affecting you. That's a good thing in a way.
I mean, I think yes and no. Like, I don't know if I fully agree. I think there's a lot that we don't know because we know that
that's where we're at.
Our fish go to maybe slightly different places, but we actually don't know how much they interact with the Norwegian salmon out there.
Yeah.
We actually don't know. I don't know if all of my smolts here go up the Norwegian coast and past a bunch of these farms.
Yes.
Is that why they're dying? Is that why I have less return? So I actually don't know, and I don't think I can say that I don't think it's affecting our populations at all with certainty. And I think the problem with sea lice in Norway, like just the problem with fish farming and how their wild populations have crashed, considering they were probably the most known country in the world for their Atlantic salmon.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty telling of like what the main source of the issue is.
We're pretty much in the same position here,
Yeah.
where we haven't proven that it's affecting our fish, because as you may know or not, there's no aquaculture in the province of Quebec. And so far, I mean, I'll speak for myself. It'll be over my dead body as long as I'm president, first of all. But there is quite a bit of aquaculture in the Maritimes, especially in Newfoundland. And we're wondering now, the particular thing of most of our rivers, anyway, in the southern Quebec and New Brunswick, a good portion of the Maritimes, they all flow into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and they migrate through the Strait of Belle Isle pretty much all at the same time.
Yeah.
So our question is, are there fish that are going near the pens that are bringing some kind of disease problem, and that's creating, because just to go back to what you both were saying, if I understand, you guys think that 2022, 2023, there was a large mortality post-smolt in your countries also. Did I understand that right? Because that's our conclusion here, but we don't know why.
There was at least some sort of decline, I would say, in the populations,
Okay.
and we're not sure why.
Okay.
And that's after, similar to what Gustav said, after we had a success story.
Very similar here. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, Lynn?
Well, I was just going to switch topic, but...
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, but I think that was an important thing. I tried to catch it when it went by there, but I mean, I think right now there's a lot of people that will be interested to understand that it might not be just a Gulf of St. Lawrence problem.
Exactly. And, you know, when we're facing the same kind of challenges, it's super important, I think, to share and to have that kind of conversation, to like see, for example, your success stories in Denmark and in Sweden with the Baltic salmon coming back and everything, like with the Denmark populations of wild salmons that are doing not that bad. We need to share that kind of recipes, I would say, like why is it going well and how can we replicate that in different places? Because at the end of the day, we're facing similar challenges and like all over the Atlantic. So and so that's something I need we need to have like these kind of conversations on. And one other thing that we might share in a way, and there are some success stories and historical like data for documenting the effect it has on Atlantic salmon, is the impact of dams and river fragmentations. We all had that. We have that in Quebec. They have that in Scandinavia as well. So what's your perspective about river fragmentation and the dam, the dam's impact? Gustav, you said that there's quite a big legacy of the compensation plans that the dams have offered to some restoration projects, but it means that the dams have had an impact at some point. So what's the situation now?
Yeah, I would say the number one problem for the wild salmon in the Baltic Sea, if you zoom out and look at over a long perspective, is definitely damming. It's so we have had in Sweden so many amazing rivers, really, really big rivers with really strong populations, and you have all these church books and all these black and white photographs of amazing runs in a lot of rivers, and all of those were sort of dammed between 1940 and 1960. And that basically just shut them down, the complete population. Now we have this sort of compensatory production program going. But so it's definitely sort of the thing to the number one. And what I want to say is that these big rivers now, there's a big initiative in the EU. It's a directive that needs to be implemented to improve connectivity all over the EU countries. And all countries are sort of forced to implement things and do stuff to meet the directives. It's a big plan in Sweden, also in Denmark, I know. And these heavily dammed rivers, they have been classified as heavily modified and been exempt. So people just, we will never do anything about these rivers.
Don't
amazing
touch them
big rivers. Yeah, because it's a major source of energy, and it's just too much effort to do anything about them. Mm-hmm. So what we're dealing with here is smaller rivers with smaller dams, and that's sort of where the discussion is.
This is where you have some sort of action power in the smaller rivers.
Exactly. Yeah. We can't do anything about the heavily modified rivers. We can just sit there until we come up with fusion power or something. We can tear down the dams. But
nothing we can do with these rivers at all.
I think it's a growing discussion, because a lot of people have sort of accepted the concept of heavily modified rivers and just backed away. But voices are being heard more and more that just what do you say? Just confronting that perspective. So why should we just keep this river? Why should we just don't do anything about them? And I think that's maybe going to happen something, but the incentive is definitely too much, too much power generation in the river, and there's no. We don't get any support to do anything in those rivers. Yeah.
That's unfortunate, because you put an optimistic person like me in that kind of situation, and I would never be able to give up on river and say like, oh, well, this one is too heavily modified, let's switch to another one. So it's kind of hard to give up on something like that. There's still something, like I feel there's always something that can be done in terms of restoration, but I can understand that addressing
sometimes just getting the best bang for your buck, I guess.
Yeah.
So
but I mean, if we look at, because in Sweden it's a private ownership, right? So we have private companies owning the dams, and the government doesn't own the river like they do in North America, especially in the US. So and then for the Atlantic salmon, there is this sort of idea that the salmon can't really pass through a number of. If it has to pass through one dam, that's one thing. But if it has to pass through 2 or 3 big dams, then it's just forget about it. But if you look at like Columbia River, where you have sort of steelhead, which is sort of an analog to Atlantic salmon, they can pass through like 20 dams, right? And it's big
possible.
Power plants for some species, So we shouldn't give up.
Not that many of them
I know.
make it up there compared to how many enter the river. So it depends, like, what's your objective? And that's... I can't help myself. I have to comment on this whole EU Water Framework Directive, because I literally, I teach this to my students about the EU Water Framework Directive. It is the most or what was intended to be the most promising piece of legislation in EU about rivers and just like the state of our waters, and it has fallen so far from doing what it aimed to do. And part of that is this very loose, jargony word that's used in there, and it's like, oh, if there's, if the river is like this or like that or like this or like that, then it's heavily modified. So if it's heavily modified, it doesn't need to meet good ecological status, it needs to meet good ecological potential. What does that mean? It means if I remove the thing that's causing it to not have this potential, then it would actually be in a good status. So it's saying the river is so screwed up because of all these dams, but if we remove the dams, they would be fine, and therefore we don't have to remove the dams because it's just so heavily modified. And it's infuriating. And I think part of the problem, in my opinion, and I know that this is a salmon podcast, but part of the problem is that we need to get people like my mom and my sister and my grandfather and whoever else, your mom, your uncle, your everybody, to care about freshwater, to care about rivers. Freshwater is not just to wash our clothes and wash our dishes and drink. It's actually like a biodiversity hotspot. It's 0.01% of all water on Earth, and yet it hosts almost like 50% of fish species at one point in their life cycle anyway. It's like, so I think if people kind of appreciated that more, then as Gustav say, there would be much more of an uproar if they could understand that the legislation we have is just not good enough.
You almost sounded passionate there.
Yeah. Okay, I think the podcast is over with that. We don't need it. No, but I mean, what an incredible conclusion. But it's not a conclusion yet. But how can we make that happen? I mean, how can we have people get it that there are some like richness in the freshwater rivers and everything, and how can we reconnect to that? I heard yesterday with a guest that we were recording in another episode that the more you go in, the more you have the opportunity to go fishing and connect with salmon, the more you build that kind of will to protect it as well. You both told me that you grew up like connecting with nature and everything. So how can we do that more to make sure that we can make people understand and realize how these rivers, how important are these rivers?
I completely agree with you there. And I think, as we see everywhere, that the strongest voice comes from the recreational fisheries, I would say, in conservational voices.
Typically.
And sort of the label of guardian of the river, I fully support that. It's definitely what we see. It's the one who cares the most about the salmon are the people up in the river fishing for them.
So we need to take care of them as well.
Yeah, well, that's a good portion of the mandate of the federation in Quebec is to represent not only the river managers but the anglers also. And just to get back to the point that Kim was mentioning, whenever I speak at venues, I never miss the opportunity to explain that Atlantic salmon is the emblematic species that of the quality of our waters. I mean, Atlantic salmon is in good waters. So if we don't take care of our good waters, our good watersheds, well, no more Atlantic salmon.
Yeah, that's an indicator of the wellness of our rivers. Do you still have hope, given the situation, given the dams, given the fish farming? How do you see the future of our rivers, the rivers in Scandinavia in a couple of years from now, and the will of people to stay connected to it and protect it?
I think hope is the only thing we have going for us. And I don't mean that in a very like funny or like pessimistic view. I actually think people are going to be a lot more willing to act or to voice their opinions if they think that there's any hope of things changing. And I think we've shown in the past that, there are success stories with fisheries. The Atlantic bluefin tuna success story, like crashing in the 60s, 70s, bouncing back in the last 20 years or so. And it's a very highly prized fish. So similar to Atlantic salmon in freshwaters, we should be able to fix things. I think it's a question of money. Unfortunately, that's often what it comes down to. If it's a question of, this hydropower company that makes money, or, the fish farming in Norway, it's about money. So I think it's about, what do we prioritize? Do we prioritize the income or this industry that is actually so detrimental, not just to Atlantic salmon, but just to the ecosystem in general? Or do we actually prioritize restoring what used to be what Norway was about, or what used to be wherever we're talking about? So yeah, I have to have hope that there is hope.
And Gustav?
Yeah, I definitely have hope for sure. And I mean, just look at the development the last 30 years. It's been incredible to see, right? So what I think is problematic is, I mean, if you can talk about forming, you can talk about damming, and that's sort of specific problems that you can define, and potential in the future, you can fix them. But when you look at sort of what we talked about in the beginning, the situation, what's happening in the sea, and if you tie climate change to that, that's sort of, it's a big picture. It's so much unknown. And as a manager in conservation, it's really like, where do you begin, right? Yes. You can fix the habitat in the river. You can lobby for politicians to maybe reduce fishery harvest and stuff like that. But sort of things happening in the sort of trophic chain out in the sea, it's I can wake up in the middle of the night thinking about sort of what to do. And maybe especially in the Atlantic Sea, right? Because you guys have done a lot of stuff right. You don't really have any harvest anymore. It's quite regulated, and sort of if your smolts die during the first winter and they don't come back, and you don't really know what's happening, and maybe there's some really big phenomenon happening out in the ocean, that's challenging, and
that's definitely our big mystery box.
Yeah, and it comes back to what Kim was saying, but in reverse, everything she named when it says it's all about money, it's about revenues. But the research at sea, it's also about money, but it's a huge expense. So she's right; it does come back a lot to money, and the lack of, or the loss of,
And yet Atlantic salmon is one of like the most studied species in the grand scheme of things. So just imagine what the situation is for other species. Yeah. And that's why it kind of goes back to, how do we connect people to freshwater? Because connecting them to freshwater is for sure going to help Atlantic salmon, but it's going to help everything else. Yeah. And it's not easy when, shows like The Blue Planet show, 20 episodes on the ocean, but nothing on rivers, for example. Mm-hmm. And that would be one way to get people to care about freshwater. Get David Attenborough to do a 6-part episode or 6-episode Blue Planet on freshwaters.
Yeah. Might as well hurry up, because
yeah,
I'm not going to finish that sentence.
No, we lost one good one recently, so we need this one a little longer.
And it's especially why I wanted you to talk about hope, because that was Jane Goodall's really like challenge and passion to stay hopeful about like the inspiring things and projects and initiatives that work, like highlight them, copy them, and share it to the world, so we can actually see some hope in this process that is quite dark at some times. But just to come back on the money, the day we will figure out a way to put a price tag on ecosystem services and the richness of our rivers and the oceans. They done that for the ocean, but as you said, rivers deserve more attention and care. The day we will be able to put a price tag on this, there's no fish farming, dam, or any industrial project that will be worth what we're risking in terms of biodiversity when we take that decision to go ahead and scrap a river for some budget or some money.
Yeah, I know, it's sad.
Yeah.
Before you, because I feel like you're moving towards some kind of a conclusion here. Yeah, I did have one question.
Yeah, go.
And there might be more here. I mean, you're the podcast master here, but pink salmon.
I didn't have that, so let's go.
Okay, well, there you go.
I was actually wondering if you were going to ask about that.
Hey, well, that's sometimes what I bring to these podcasts. I mean, I've always called myself in French the la plante verte that doesn't know much because I'm not a biologist and I'm not a scientist or whatever, but an avid angler and very much interested. And yeah, we're kind of worried. We have caught some pink salmon in the northern part of Quebec. What's going on your side of the Ocean? Sorry.
So the pink salmon that we get here are from the Barents Sea. So I think Russia brought them in at some point.
That's where ours
know
are
what
coming
the
from
idea
also.
was there. Yeah. And so the good thing we have going for us right now is that they're very cold adapted species, or a strain that is very cold adapted. That being said, many years ago, and you'll probably laugh. So I've worked with pink salmon in the Fraser River.
Yeah.
And I've always said they're the fish of the future because they can do anything. They can, and yet they have the ability to do a lot, but they're lazy, which is about as smart as you can be for a fish, having the capacity to do hard things, but taking the easy way out. And I told people here, I said, the pink salmon are definitely going to come to Denmark. We've caught a few. Even though it's like quite warm here for them. So they are, I think, on their way. It's not a problem in Denmark. Like, it's not like there's competition between Atlantic salmon and pink salmon. We're not there yet.
Not yet.
In Norway, it's a big issue. And that's the thing, we don't know yet, because the money to do the research that we need to do to see whether we should expect that they will have some sort of effect is not there yet. We're very good at playing catch up once it's too late. This fish species has collapsed. We need to figure out why. And it's like, well, where was that money 10 years ago when we started to see the signs, but nobody kind of listened to us?
Well, there's rumors that it is affecting some rivers in Russia, but for some reason, we're not talking to Russia very much lately.
Yeah.
We're just not talking very much at all about what's going on over
exactly.
there.
And is it the same in Sweden, Gustav?
Yeah, we don't have them yet. We have them in a few of the West Coast rivers sporadically, but we're expecting them, and also into the Baltic Sea eventually. I think they will probably get there at some point. There was the Russians did some stocking of pink in the Baltic Sea like in the 60s and 70s. So we had weird runs already back in the days in some of our rivers, but nothing that got traction. But I think eventually it will happen, right? And,
well, the thing is, the interesting thing, as Kim was saying, it's an endangered species out west, but we consider it an invasive species out here. Yeah. And what worries us is naturally its behavior, where, if it eventually comes to spawn on our salmon rivers, it will change the ecosystem just because of the dying off of the spawners afterwards or whatever. We all know that, for the most part, our salmon rivers are pretty poor ecosystems, right? So that's our concern right now.
And one thing I can say about pink salmon is that they are in Greenland rivers, even though our Atlantic salmon are not. Okay. So they're definitely, I would expect, they will cause some problems for the char, or at least have some sort of effect on the rivers. I don't know whether the young survive, because Greenland rivers are very nutrition poor. There's not a whole lot going on in those rivers, but that's not to say that it's not having any effect. So I know they're in the rivers there.
It's already there. Yeah.
Well, okay.
So will it be something you have on your plate for like the next couple of years? What's on your plate for the years ahead? Like, is it some kind of thing you're going to studying the pink salmon, or more climate change? I don't know what.
If we can get money for it.
Yeah.
If they'll give us money for it.
Like endless money. What's your first thing what's the first research project you do with the money?
Honestly, I think I would tag a shit ton of smolts with data storage tags that only activates, a year after they're at sea, so that when they come back, you actually get a bit more on the fine scale resolution of where they are and what they do. The thing is that data storage tags are so expensive, and it's very high risk when you put it in a fish that then goes to sea.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing, but infinite money, that's maybe where I would go.
Yeah. And Gustav, with infinite money, what do you do?
I think I think the main problem, probably it's controversial to say, but the main problem in the future is probably climate change, and the Baltic Sea is sort of warming up 3 times quicker than the Atlantic Sea, for example. So I think, and that will create weird problems. So somehow to how we can mitigate that, if that means that we have to change the season for fisheries or close more rivers and stuff like that, it's unfortunate, but more research into understanding that.
On the same topic, though, climate change, I mean, do you guys have some kind of, I'm not going to use the word hope again, but, you know, good news, reason to believe that we might be heading, you know, in a few better years anyway, now that El Nino is kind of moving out and making room for La Nina. I mean, we're kind of hoping that's going to bring a positive change. Are you guys thinking about that also, or?
I mean, yeah, but it's so hard because it's such a cyclical thing. So you might have a bit of hope for a few years that like things are actually looking better, but then you'll go back and I feel like we're just going to hit even harder. So like my hope really is that we really start to sanction the top 1%, which are creating most of the climate change related issues. I think we just really need to slow down the rate at which we are warming things up. And I think everyone has some sort of responsibility, and that's not to say that everyone should just suddenly be a vegetarian. That's like not where I'm going with this, but I think like education is also part of our responsibilities. At least us who have like a stake in this, and I think every single citizen of planet Earth has a stake at this. But I think politically we need to just be more active. There needs to be more done to slow that down. And we're lucky we're in like the temperate region. Like we know that our salmon can handle up to, you know, 20, 22 degrees probably. It doesn't mean they're thriving at that temperature, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have 100% die off. But if you think about the fish, you know, around the tropics who are much closer to their thermal limits, I mean, they're doomed if we don't do something now. So in that sense, yeah, there's hope, but we need to be fast.
Yeah. We need to be fast, but slow down. Leave your car, go to a river, and connect with nature and rivers and salmon, I think. Yeah.
Good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, it's been like I could continue this conversation for hours, but yeah, it's super interesting. But as we put that to an end for now, Kim Birnie-Gauvin and Gustav Hellström, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was so interesting and passionate what you had to share in terms of story and knowledge. Thank you so much for being here. Seriously. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Et pour nos auditeurs francophones, un petit recap. On vient de passer 1 heure avec ces 2 grands experts des saumons qui sont basés du côté de la Scandinavie. Et on a vu que peu importe si on parle d'aquaculture ou encore des barrages ou de la façon dont on affecte nos rivières, je pense que le grand message, c'est de donner un peu plus de place aux rivières pour mieux reconnecter avec ces écosystèmes-là dont on parle pas assez et puis qui représentent des habitats pour le saumon, mais le saumon, à la fin, c'est presque juste une excuse pour protéger tout le reste.
C'est toute la biodiversité autour de ça qui est important.
Puis c'est pour ça qu'on l'appelle le roi de nos rivières. Hein. Il porte sur lui le destin de toutes les autres espèces.
Espèce emblématique de la qualité de nos eaux.
Exact. Donc, c'était vraiment un plaisir. Thanks again, Kim and Gustav. And,
thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a great podcast.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.